Welcome to Chapter 1 lecture, Foundations in Psychology and Emotional Intelligence. Now, what's important as we dive into this course together is the fact that psychology is more than just taking a course. Psychology is everywhere, and having the ability to apply your understanding and knowledge of psychology is going to help you live a better life, make a bigger impact on the world, and build stronger relationships with others. Now, throughout the course, you're going to revisit 5 programmatic course themes for Psi 108 that are going to help you understand how to make stronger personal and professional connections. So it's important that you dissect these during the first week of the term, because you're going to, again, build upon your knowledge of each of these programmatic course themes as we progress throughout the course. So our first programmatic course theme and the hot topic of week 1, right, is emotional intelligence, or EI. And as you recall, if you haven't read through the web text already, emotional intelligence is how you understand and respond to the emotions in yourself and the people around you. And it's a set of skills that involves the following: self-awareness, self-regulation, ethical judgment, empathy, social awareness, and conflict resolution. Now, we're going to revisit these later in this lecture, so for right now we'll move on to the next programmatic course theme. Ethics are moral principles that guide behavior. Self-care is taking time for personal reflection and developing skills to improve your well-being. Social justice is the ability to apply psychology to help improve society. And career connections is applying psychology to improve communication, build stronger professional connections with other people, increase empathy in your interactions with others, and facilitate collaboration with other people. Now, it'll be important this term to understand how to engage with your web text. And I want to take a moment to review the active reading section of your web text and go over the tools that are going to help you absorb. So what's important about engaging with your course web text is being an active reader. And by that is you're engaging in dialogue with the text as you're going. So you're asking questions about the things that you're learning. And you're also engaging by way of highlighting, taking notes, listening to the audio of it being read to you. So an active reader is somebody who's having conversations with the text. You're constantly thinking, you're noting things, and you're trying to just absorb things in the way that it works best for you. So I want to encourage each of you to practice with some of these tools. You simply can highlight the text you want to highlight, and it'll appear four different colors, or 3 main different colors. And once you highlight something, you can go and click to add a note. And you can also go to your tools menu and have it read to you. And I encourage each of you to take time to plan in your web text readings, because you can't just have everything completed on Sunday. There's coming up next week in Chapter 2 is one of the heaviest readings in your web text. It's a pretty long chapter. So take time to plan out your reading throughout the week so that if you do need the text read to you, you have time to plan that in. And that you have time to plan in your own ability to process and absorb, rather than just pile on everything at the last minute. Now, what is psychology? If someone were to yell out, "Common sense," heck no. Psychology uses empirical evidence or data that's supported with direct and verifiable observations to understand why people think and act the way they do. And there's two different definitions that you might hear of psychology. And the most popular definition, or frequently used, is that psychology is the science of human behavior and mental processes. Another definition that some people will share with you is that psychology is the study of how we think and act. And both of these definitions are appropriate. So what is human behavior, right? So human behavior is something that is voluntary in the fact that a person can make a decision and act on that decision. For example, they get up and walk out of the room. That's a behavior. It can also be involuntary, in which you have virtually no control over it. So say, for example, you are attracted to somebody, and physiologically your pupils will dilate. That physiological reaction isn't something that you're in control over, all right? It just happens, and it communicates a message to another human being that you are attracted to them. And what does it mean for mental processes? So mental processes are things we can't see. All right, we can see human behavior, but we can't see mental processes. And mental processes are basically your thoughts, your beliefs, your personal feelings, and your memories of events. Now, your course web text provides a very brief overview of the history of psychology, but this text and every introduction to psychology text starts with the father of modern psychology, and that is Wilhelm Wundt. And he is considered the father of modern psychology because he established the first experimental psychology laboratory. And this happened in 1879 in Germany. Now, he explored the mind using what is understood as structuralism. And this is where you combine objective elements such as sight or taste and subjective elements, which are your thoughts, your feelings. And he broke conscious experiences into objective sensations and subjective experiences. So how do our sensations or senses impact our experiences? Now, another contributor to psychology is William James. And William James was interested in the function or purpose of the mind and behavior. And he started measuring the mind using functionalism by focusing on behavior in addition to the mind and consciousness. Now, someone that is widely known in the field of psychology because of mainstream media nowadays is Sigmund Freud. And he developed the psychodynamic perspective, which examines the unconscious mental processes and childhood experiences for clues about an adult psychology. And Sigmund Freud developed this idea of talk therapy that kind of helps people bring a lot of what's in our unconscious mind to the surface to support the healing process. And many psychotherapists will use talk therapy, and it is a method that works with healing. However, psychodynamic perspective is not something that's widely studied anymore because it's so difficult to measure the unconscious mind. The next area that came along was behaviorism, which examines observable behavior and how environmental stimuli affect actions and behavior. And three major contributors to the field of behaviorism are Ivan Pavlov, John B. Watson, and B.F. Skinner. Now, Ivan Pavlov developed classical conditioning. He needed a way to study the digestive system of a dog, and he needed to collect the saliva of the dog. So he developed a way to have the dog salivate at the sound of the bell. All right, and he did this by pairing something that would make the dog salivate, which was meat, with the tone of the bell. And over time, he took away the meat, and just the bell alone would make the dog salivate. John B. Watson expanded upon Ivan Pavlov's research on classical conditioning by exploring how people can generalize things like fear. And he conducted an experiment on his son known as the Little Albert experiment, in which a gong startled his son, and he would play the gong every time something white and fluffy was around him. A little mouse, the beard of Santa Claus. A gong would be played, and it would make the child cry. So the child eventually was then given a rabbit, right? And he would cry because it was white and fluffy. So anything white and fluffy, no matter if it was a mouse, Santa Claus beard, or a rabbit, made little Albert cry. And that showed how fear can be generalized. And B.F. Skinner explored operant conditioning, in which he used reinforcement and punishment in order to get a desired response. So, for example, in his studies with pigeons, if he wanted a pigeon to spin around, and the pigeon knew to do that, right? So the pigeon actually would do it. So he'd give a command that said spin around. Maybe it was a tone, and the bird would spin around. Lights would flash. Food would be dispensed, and sounds would be played, and all as forms of reinforcement when the bird would do something that the researcher wanted. Now, in his development, he went on to develop this Skinner box, which is mainly used with small rodents like mice or rats. And a Skinner box uses a form of punishment. Now, with the pigeons, a form of punishment would be withholding the food or the reinforcements with the sound and the lights flashing. But with the rodent, in the Skinner box, he uses a form of punishment that is a small electric shock. So if the animal doesn't do something that you're commanding it to, it'll get a shock. If it does something that you wanted it to do, it'll get a reward like food. It might get another sensory reinforcer like a sound or a light blinking in its box as well. Contemporary psychologists use this biopsychosocial model to more deeply understand human behavior and mental processes. So if we look at 3 different areas, we can understand these things in a whole more complex way. And how they overlap and intertwine is important as well. So at the biological level, we're considering how your brain anatomy, brain chemistry, genes, and evolutionary processes influence thoughts and behaviors. At the psychological level, we're considering the impact of mental processes, such as memories, emotions, and your perceptions on how that influences your actions or behaviors. And then at the social level, we're considering how our behaviors and thoughts are shaped by the people, situations, and cultures around us. So, how our environment is influencing us. Now, diving into the hot topic of this week is the programmatic course theme of emotional intelligence. And as we discussed emotional intelligence previously, it's your ability to recognize and respond to the emotions in yourself and the emotions of others around you. Your course textbook takes it a little bit further and defines emotional intelligence as the practice of self-control and the ability to accurately perceive the emotions of self and others, appropriately adapt emotions and actions in daily interactions, and consistently understand and express interest in the well-being of self and others. So, not only is it important to recognize what you and others are feeling, you have to be able to be mindful of how you respond and behave towards those around you. And once you've taken that emotional intelligence self-assessment, these 5 domains are critical in critical areas of emotional intelligence. So the areas where you've scored low in the domains are areas where you can improve and work on yourself to get to a higher level of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence requires self-awareness, which is understanding your own emotions, your own thoughts, and how those influence your decision making. Maybe understanding even your own personal biases and beliefs that might interfere with your behavior and your decision making processes. And being conscious of bias is incredibly important in your development of self-awareness. It involves self-regulation, the ability to manage stress, the ability to control your emotions, the ability to control impulses. It requires the application of ethical judgment, which is thinking about the consequences before acting and doing, right? So understanding that, things that you might respond to might need a pause rather than immediacy is important as well, because so many of us go through life and try to get things done relatively quickly, and we might overlook things that are unethical in doing so. So we have to think things through and take a break and pause before jumping into something immediately. It requires applying empathy, which is understanding those around you and being able to kind of put yourself in other people's shoes, so to speak, when trying to understand their situations and where they're coming from. It requires social awareness and the ability to resolve conflicts as well. So why is emotional intelligence important? Why are you learning all about this? Well, emotional intelligence has been found to improve job performance, increase job satisfaction, improve overall well-being, and strengthen social relationships. So emotional intelligence will factor in to all of the other 4 programmatic course themes that you're learning about this term. So it factors into not only work performance, but your self-care, your ability to make ethical judgments, your ability to advocate for social issues, and improve your career connections and your networking abilities. So emotional intelligence truly overlaps as well as the other ones overlap into this one, right? So you can see a lot of emotional intelligence requires ethics, it requires self-care, it requires being understanding and empathetic towards social issues and diversity. So all of these things overlap, but it's important because without emotional intelligence, you're going to lack the connections that are going to help you drive, and the personal connections that are going to help you develop the grit to get through those difficult times. Psychologists use the scientific method when conducting research, and the research process itself is an ongoing, ever-changing, evolving process that sparks new questions over time. So it's kind of a never-ending cycle of inquiry. And so the first step of the scientific method is to observe and question. All right, so you observe the world around you, you ask questions, and that helps you develop a hypothesis for step 2. A hypothesis is a prediction, and it's usually, in elementary terms, an if-then statement. If something happens, then this will happen. But your hypothesis is a prediction that's going to happen. And in order to test your hypothesis, you conduct a study. You do some research. And then you make conclusions based on the data that you've gathered in your research. And the final step is sharing the findings. There's a variety of ways in which you can go about conducting research, and one is through observation. And with observation, you can be present physically in the environment and record as you're present, or you can put a camera in that environment and analyze your data afterwards. A case study is where you're collecting information on either an individual or group of people to be able to describe the individual or the group. And surveys and interviews, which are self-reports on people's thoughts and feelings on a wide variety of topics. Now, anytime a researcher is present while they're collecting data or gathering it, such as maybe you're present as an observer in a room, maybe you're watching a teacher teach at the front of the classroom, or you're collecting data by interviewing people or administering a survey. Your presence alone will influence the study because it incorporates bias. And people will act differently around the researcher, or they might lie on during their interview with you because they don't want to be looked at negatively. They want to come across in a positive light in the way they want others to perceive them. So you have to be careful when you're administering a research study, how you go about administering a research study, because there's so much of an impact that bias has. And you want to make sure that you're reaching a sample population that is within the demographics you desire to understand more about. Now, correlational methods are important to understand because as you explore research, you're examining things to see how they're associated much of the time. And these associations are just that. They're how one thing is associated with another. Correlations do not show causation, or in other words, correlations do not show cause and effect. In research, you can have positive and negative correlations. So on the left here, when we look at grade point averages, and intelligence test scores, we see a positive correlation, because as grade point averages increase, intelligence test scores also increase. Both are moving in the same direction. So positive correlation is found between intelligence and academic achievement. On the right, we see a negative correlation. And we see a negative correlation between stress levels and immune system functioning. So as stress levels increase, immune system functioning decreases. So one is increasing and one is decreasing. Those are always negative correlations. Should a researcher want to establish cause and effect, they would have to develop an experiment. In an experiment, you can deliberately produce a change in one variable and observe the effects of that change. Particularly, you'll have an experimental group and a control group. And your independent variable is what you'll be manipulating or changing in your experiment. And the dependent variable is what's going to be measured, or what is actually affected by the change. So for example, if you wanted to conduct an experiment with animals or with humans, you might do a blind experiment where the participants don't know if they're in the treatment group or the control group. Or perhaps a double-blind experiment, which in this case it would be double-blind. You can randomly assign the animals or the humans to a treatment group or control group. And a double-blind means the animals don't know, or the humans wouldn't know, but also the researchers don't know who's assigned to what group and who's receiving treatments and who's not. That reduces bias completely, because the experimenter isn't looking for cues within the animal or the human subject. So take, for instance, we're looking at the effect of a drug on cardiovascular activity. You would assign a group to the treatment group, they receive the drug, or a control group, and they might receive a placebo. So everybody gets something to take, all right? But nobody will know if they're getting the drug or if they're getting the placebo. Then the researcher measures cardiovascular activity on both groups, every animal within both groups, and the data will tell that individual if the drug is having an effect on cardiovascular activity or not. If there's no significance between, no significant findings in and of itself, then the treatment has absolutely no impact on cardiovascular activity. Codes of ethics and research guidelines have been developed due to mistakes from the past, where we've had research studies that have been unethical. And your course web text discusses the Stanford prison experiment and Tuskegee syphilis study as examples of these. And to start with, the Stanford prison experiment was conducted in 1971 by Dr. Philip Zimbardo at Stanford University. And he wanted to explore how the role and the environment somebody is placed in impacts their behavior. So he had male college students sign up for a research study. They were healthy, they were examined physically and mentally prior to participating. And he assigned them to either the role of a prison guard or a prisoner. And he sat back and watched as the roles took over the human beings. And over time during the research study, as the prison guards were given guidelines to follow, he observed them becoming more abusive and violent towards the prisoners. So the research study itself was unethical because it caused undue psychological harm on the participants. The study, some participants had requested to leave the study and were told that they couldn't during their participation in the study, which was a violation of ethics. And Dr. Philip Zimbardo himself played the role of the warden, and as the primary researcher, he should never have involved himself in that way. So that was also a reason why that became unethical. But his experiment demonstrated how the power of the situation can turn good people bad, so to speak. And the Tuskegee syphilis study was conducted from 1932 to 1972 in Tuskegee, Alabama, on African American males. And without their informed consent, they had roughly 400 African American males who they injected syphilis into. And they wanted to study the effects that syphilis had on the mind and body. During the time of the study, those who grew ill, they became blind, went insane, or even died. Researchers didn't find help for them or provide any medication to make sure that they were okay. And during that time as well, medications came out, penicillin came out to treat syphilis, and the treatment of syphilis wasn't provided to the participants of this study. So that, and the fact that they're using African American males as research subjects is why this is an incredibly unethical study. So codes of ethics came out of the unethical research mistakes of the past, and Congress commissioned the Belmont Report, and they composed a group together to ensure that respect, safety, and justice was part of the research process. So they included researchers, doctors, scientists, philosophers, people who were experts in the field of research, those who understood ethics. What did this result in? It resulted in institutions that conduct research establishing institutional review boards. And what that is a group of individuals, typically at a college campus or university, that are privy to the codes of ethics in research, who review research proposals, and either approve them or deny them, to ensure that only research that gets conducted on college or university grounds is ethical. And APA codes of ethics ensured that researchers obtain informed consent, which is your permission as the participant, that you're going to be part of the study. You're giving your permission to be part of the study, but you're also informed on everything that's going to happen to you, and if there's any chance that you might be harmed, you'll be informed of that prior to participating. It ensures that researchers maintain safety, privacy, and respect for all participants. And this means that Participants aren't going to be named in any type of scholarly journal article. Participants, should they be referred to in literature, might be referred to by a number. But they're not to release any information on who participated in the study to the press or to the public. It's all very private. And researchers are to ensure that they debrief participants after the study is over with. So sometimes you're not truly informed as to what the researchers are measuring for in the beginning of the study, because that could bias how you behave during the study. But at the end of the study, you should be fully aware of what the researchers were actually measuring for and how that's going to impact the field that they specialize in. Now, a lot of researchers will lure participants in through incentives, right? You want to give some money to people so that they sign up, or some type of incentive, like even a college credit towards a course. Could be even your intro to psychology course, where you sign up for a few research studies and you get credit applied towards your grade. Now, in those instances, the researchers have to respect this code of ethics, because a participant has the right to withdraw from the study at any point in time. So that means if you make it halfway through a study, should you decide to withdraw, you're still entitled to those incentives that were promised to you, or that lured you in, so to speak, to be a participant in the study. Thank you for reviewing Chapter 1 lecture. Should you have any questions, please post those to the General Questions Discussion Forum. Have a good day.